A clean society is a healthy society. But what happens to items dragons discard? What happens to their rubbish? Well, that falls to the sub-department of Basic Waste Management, a sub-department of the Department of Civil Service. Hi, I'm your host Heatwave, and in today's little episode, I'll be exploring the basic waste management, garbage collection, and recycling in the Empire of Pareena. 3 moons? Why? I hate bin juice. And I just got my talons painted. I hate this job sometimes. Welcome back to the Wings of Fire spin-off series, Empire of Pareena. If you haven't done so already, please leave a like, and if you haven't done so already, please subscribe so you don't miss any episodes that I publish. I've stated a while ago about the Department of Civil Service and how they are responsible for dealing with many public services offered to the dragons of the Empire. Their roles include providing the public with food, a warm and safe place to sleep, and by providing clean and tidy public amenities. But also, cleaning up the streets is a role of this department, and that's what I'll be focusing on in this episode. But let's start with some legal work, of course. Command 11 states, all dragons must respect the environment, respect the land, and the sea. Socially, the dragons of the Empire have a civil duty to pick up after themselves, to keep their lands clean and tidy, but also to do what they can to lessen the burden on Pareena itself by being sustainable in their resource management. You'll find on the corner of many streets in the cities or larger public spaces of Pareena a rubbish bin. Made of iron and embroidered and shaped like a cylinder, here dragons discard any of their rubbish like empty food cans, old paper and parchment, and wood, if it fits. Plant materials, like leaves, are just discarded because, well, they're purely organic, but any food scraps are discarded in specially marked bins. These bins are collected in the same fashion that I'm about to describe, but they are sent off to farmlands to be used as compost. Any larger establishments, like restaurants for example, that are expected to have lots of rubbish, are given extra sets of rubbish bins to prevent overflow, and this is issued by the Sub-Department of Basic Waste Management. Anyway, once these bins are inevitably full, the Sub-Department of Basic Waste Management will thus collect these bins by using their own instrument of the Imperial Locomotive Production Model Number 4. When production started of this conversion of the standard Imperial tank back in 2070, out of all those produced, about 5 or 7 of them were sent to the Sub-Department of Basic Waste Management to be used as essentially rubbish trucks. It uses the same basic design for the leg and forward roll cage compartment, but at the back is a large angular box hanging over the tail. On the top is a tarp that can be rolled over to cover any load, and the whole assembly can be tilted upwards to help empty any of the load. The rig is powered by the standard gas turbine engine the Empire has come accustomed to using. So every few days, one of these ILPM-4s will scour a designated city or large settlement, like the Mojave or the Twin Beach Island. The tank shall walk each street and stop by each public rubbish bin, and 2 dragons on the back of each rig, hanging on by a set of guardrails, will jump off, pop open each bin, and deposit its contents into the rear of the rig system. Once the tank is full, or when all the bins have been emptied, It will fly its way back to the first city, landing among the industrial zone where all the major manufacturing buildings are located. All rigs will land and offload all of their rubbish content into one factory. This factory is privately owned, and it's the Cassowary Recycling and Reclaim. This privately owned plant is under a very generous contract with the Imperial government. The company pays for the Imperial government to deliver all of this recyclable waste material, and then they sort these different materials before processing it to then sell it back. The name cassowary is quite metaphoric. In the wilds of the wet spring rainforest, the mighty cassowary is known for eating fruit from the ground, processing it in its stomach, and then later dropping any of the seeds it eats in the open to begin the growth of a brand new tree. They are very much important to the longevity of the rainforest, and thus the name was used. The use of a private company was deliberate. This means that the Department of Civil Service does not have to overbloat any of its sub-departments to deal with the processing of raw material and then selling it back to the public. The Cassowary Recycling and Reclaim processes a number of scrap and discarded material from the bigger populated spaces of Pareena. Considering that everything dragons use is made of natural resources and thus not artificial, anything and everything can be recycled because it's made up of the 4 to 5 basic resources. That being metal, glass, wood, paper, and also textiles. Scrap metal, like tin cans from food or other storage items, are simply melted down in large furnaces and molded into sheets or ingots to be sold. Glass from bottles are crushed in huge basins with muddlers until it becomes a fine powder. This powder is then sold off to be melted into new forms of glass. Paper, scrolls, and parchment is cut using long, flat blades until it's only small pieces. These pieces are then pulped and soaked in water. What's left is a big mush of paper that's rolled into a shape and left to cure and dry, making a brand new scroll or sheet of paper. Wood is a lot harder to recycle and seems to be the least discarded material due to its long natural lifespan when used. But wood that is recycled is simply mulched up to be used as bark for, say, gardens in the Imperial Palace. Textile waste is even rarer. Cloth and textile in the Empire is made to a very high standard, to the point that some garments have outlived their creators by centuries. With all these broken down, processed, and acquired materials, the company then sells off these reclaimed scrap to individual dragons or even smaller private organizations. Ever wondered where local blacksmiths can find raw metal to work with? Well, they buy it from the Cassowary Recycling and Reclaim. Due to the government owning all means of mining, which is done to lift the tax burden on the Empire, any dragon wishing to buy raw materials will do so through this organization, evidently building the imperial economy. The Empire has a long history of using whatever is naturally available, because, well, you never know when those things could run out or dry up. Sustainability is a deeply held practice in the Empire. Nothing should be wasted, even those rare mined materials. And there's nothing wrong with having clean streets, after all. In fact, it's the mistake the SSG made. It was resource management that led to both the Groznian Civil War and later the War of the Red Sands. Once the new Soviet was in power, the SSG entered into overspending of the little wealth their lands had. Their overspending and lack of reason for producing sustainable practices would of course lead to the War of the Red Sands from their perspective. A conflict, again from their perspective, originally fought for resources. Finally, I'll take a little gander at the Sub-Department of Basic Waste Management, and their layout is, as you could guess, very uniform to all the other government departments. The Sub-Department of Basic Waste Management is responsible for, essentially, picking up all of the basic waste that dragons produce, like rubbish from old scrolls, old books, old textiles, or old food. It has a headquarters, of course, to govern and lead the sub-department. Quite straightforward. A grouping responsible for filing and dealing with paperwork and other bureaucratic nonsense the Empire is indebted with. Below them are the actual sanitary workers, the dragons responsible for collecting the trash and flying the rig systems. And then there's a maintenance section responsible for keeping all of the walker equipment in working order. The uniform of a sanitary worker is just that, uniform. To what is commonly seen in the Empire, of course, a blue bakama, some extra padding and kit. Some carry a long wooden pole with a small steel spike at the end, used to stab and collect rubbish. So in the end, the Empire wishes to waste not a scrap of valuable material. Every dragon has a civil duty to properly discard their rubbish in the bins provided, and it's the tireless and thankless job of the Sub-Department of Basic Waste Management to keep the cycle of sustainability turning in the Empire of Pareena. And that concludes another episode of the Wings of Fire spin-off series, Empire of Pareena. Thank you very much for listening. I've been your host, Heatwave, signing off.